Strip mine traps are great, but they were sort of hard to justify given the total chaos of City 17. Even though we couldn't use strip mines a lot, they made sense in this interrupted ambush scene.
I'll cover the street while you figure this out.
This explosion permanently seals a cafe door, which has a few benefits. From a design perspective, we found that when we limit the amount of backtracking players can do, it gives them confidence to venture forward. And from a practical standpoint, we can clean up the now unreachable entities, giving us a big reduction in overhead. It also helps to minimize potential bugs and exploits.
Here, bring it closer. Gordon, hold up a second.
Originally, the player didn't get any weapons until the end of this map, so roller mines were the only way to kill the soldiers. As we added more content to previous levels, it became impractical for players to be without a gun for so long. As a result, players get weapons much earlier now.
One of the primary design goals of Episode 1 was to convey the sense that Alex and the player are a team. This sniper sequence provides an opportunity for Alex to offer combat support in a cool new way. It also gives the player a chance to watch zombies get sniped up close and from various angles.
Players didn't have any weapons in the original version of this map. That made it a lot more important to remove the boards with a gravity gun so that Alex could snipe the zombies. Once weapons were added though, the sky bridge became less of a puzzle and more of a straightforward combat event. We added more zombies to increase the challenge, but pulling the boards off is still the most fun way to get through this section.
Our AI is inherently unscripted, which means that we have to design spaces that permit our characters to make good choices. The AI is better able to make intelligent decisions when there are alternate routes through a combat space. This hallway started out as a straight-shot corridor with a door at the end for soldiers to enter through, but this design didn't provide the AI with enough choices to make the soldier behavior very interesting. Adding an additional space on the side allowed them to find cover and flank the player, both of which dramatically improved the entertainment value of this encounter.
The first prototype of Episode 1's door blast effect was here in the Combine Garrison. Being peppered with chunks of wood while soldiers poured into the room through a haze of smoke proved to be an effective dramatic tool. It was also an excellent way to simultaneously ungate the player and flood the area with enemies. It was so unanimously successful in playtest that we ended up adding it in several places throughout the episode.
Whew. I think we just broke about 50 Combine regulations. What's that beeping sound? Get away from the doors!
At this point in the action, we really felt that we needed a combat crescendo. Antline guards make great boss challenges, and we decided to add some Combine forces to the mix because watching AI characters fight each other is always entertaining. This setup had a few other benefits as well. Since players had previously only fought alone against the guards, this was the first time they'd actually witnessed secondhand the effects of a guard headbutt. They'd also see an APC in action, and in case there was any doubt, get definite proof that Combine soldiers and Antline guards don't get along, underscoring the collapse of Combine dominance in City 17.
Antline guard arenas have a few specific design requirements. For instance, since the guard is only armed with a melee attack, we can't let the player reach any place that's inaccessible to the guard, such as rooftops and other high perches, that the player could only arrive at after being launched by a guard headbutt. The arenas also need plenty of physics objects for the guard to toss, and at least one unlimited ammo crate, so that the player can't run out of ammunition before killing the guard. For this battle, we also introduced a steady stream of regular antlions to limit the player's ability to constantly circle the antlion guard.
In early versions of this area, there was no side passage on the street, and the gash in the road was created by the gunship that the player later fights in the hospital attic. As development progressed, however, gameplay, story, and performance requirements made this initial design unworkable. The new side passage provided a short break in the combat tension after the boss battle, and also helped us stay within our performance budget.
After the Antlion Guard fight, playtesters were reporting some combat fatigue. We decided to include an environmental puzzle here to break up the pacing before the subsequent street battle. We originally worried that a densely packed room full of hopper mines, trip mines, and explosive barrels was a little too implausible, but playtesters loved the sudden reveal of the room and then enjoyed navigating it, so this ended up being another case where we accepted a trade-off between fun and maintaining a strictly consistent fiction. At one point, this was the site of a physically simulated elevator puzzle. It was kind of neat, but it caused a lot of problems in playtests. Even though the puzzle mostly obeyed the laws of physics, it wasn't all in line with the way we had trained players to expect elevators to work in our world. We considered adding some earlier training to support it, but quickly abandoned the idea in favor of a redesign that was more immediately understandable while still being fun. This space was designed to lure players onto a section of breakable floor that drops them into a room full of zombies. Players are enticed into the trap by some reward items and a chance to peek in the hole. We like to surprise players, but we never want them to feel like they've been treated unfairly.
I don't believe it. How the hell did you get out of the Citadel?
We're not exactly
Barney,
sure.
like Dr. Kleiner, is one of the characters with the deepest roots in Half-Life 1.
But what about
His
you,
personality is more iconic and retains more of the comic stylization of the first game. This type of character allows us to mix up the mood a little bit, to inject some absurd humor into the otherwise grim scenarios of the Half-Life universe, while characters such as Alex and Eli Vance have allowed us to explore more realistic dramatic possibilities. We're still very much attached to our roots in satire and black humor.
You guys know you two head that way. I'll hit the streets and round up everyone who's been waiting. We'll meet you
Barney's
there.
big crowbar
Sounds
scene
good.
here required a
Let's
few
go.
tricks to pull off.
Hey, Gordon, before you
There are
go,
actually 3 separate crowbar models in this sequence.
Listen, I don't
First,
have
there's the
many
one
more
stuck
of
in the
these, so
machine.
try not to
When
lose
Barney
this
grabs that
okay?
one, we remove it from the world and switch on a second crowbar that's been in Barney's hand the entire time, only invisible.
Dog, you.
Both of these models are purely decorative, so as soon as Barney makes his tossing motion, we hide the second crowbar and create a third usable crowbar that then bounces to the ground.
Whenever possible, we like to foreshadow impending boss battles by introducing the enemy before the actual fight. In this case, you know you're going to be seeing that gunship again pretty soon. Instead of letting the gunship AI have its own way here, we forced the ship to crash right into the attic. It's a dramatic payoff for winning the battle, and it gives players an opportunity to examine a gunship up close at their leisure.
Wow! I mean, holy... That was... Jesus, Gordon, you're a real terror. Think it's dead? Maybe you should whack it with a crowbar, just in case.
We designed this gunship battle to create a dynamic, evolving experience, while still keeping the player within a constrained area. Initially, the space appears straightforward and provides plenty of cover. As the environment gets progressively more damaged, combat becomes more challenging. Players are increasingly open to enemy fire, and the path to the rocket crate becomes more difficult to navigate. As the roof breaks apart, however, the gunship also becomes more visible, and therefore easier to hit, keeping things relatively in balance. The lighting in this area was tuned to play off of the HDR tone mapping effects between the dark inner spaces and the progressively open, bright sky above.
We designed this area to be an entertaining showcase for NPC combat. Because of our dynamic AI, these kinds of battles never really play out the same way twice. Players often like to sit back, watch the show, and then dive into the fray at their own discretion. We also felt it was time to introduce a new combat ability for Alex, so we gave her a shotgun here. Not only are shotguns terrific for zombie hunting, their size and ponderous handling characteristics make for some great combat animations.
The hospital was a completely new interior space that we had to design pretty much from scratch. Like most of City 17's visuals, it was inspired by Eastern European architecture. The surgery lamps and the overall white and yellow color scheme were drawn from photos of a hospital in Chernobyl. The tilework and the high archways were chosen to give the area the institutional feel of an old European hospital, and the beds were based on some World War II images. In fact, we avoided modern-looking fixtures and furniture altogether in order to differentiate the place from a contemporary hospital.
Door-banging zombies were supposed to give players a safe glimpse of the threat they'd have to face later in the level. In the original design, players couldn't open the door. The zombies would burst through on their own after the player had done a little exploring. We abandoned that plan when many playtesters exhibited a pretty much single-minded fascination with opening the door as soon as they saw it. We made the door openable, though if players ignore it, the zombies will eventually break it down themselves.
To make the set of empty corridors look like a hospital, we chose some iconic hospital props that could be used multiple times throughout the level. Then we built the models with details, multiple skins, and vertical and horizontal elements that would be visually interesting in the space.
Too much of the same type of uninterrupted gameplay causes fatigue. Through repeated playtests, we learned that by the time players reached this part of the hospital, they were ready for a break from the intense combat. In response to that feedback, we inserted this relatively calm exploration puzzle as a change of pace. It gives players a respite from combat while still presenting them with an interesting challenge.
What you're seeing here is a visual representation of a node graph, a set of nodes and all the connections between them. The node graph is used by NPCs to figure out how to move around the world. It's not really a specific set of instructions, but rather a sort of information repository. Among other things, NPCs use the node graph to dynamically chart paths to distant areas, find cover, or scout out firing positions with a clear line of sight to their enemy.
This turret scenario was designed to showcase Alex's ability to provide cover for players in combat. She always hangs back a little, blasting anything that moves. In the original version, players could knock over lightly protected turrets with a single rocket, fired from the safe end of the corridor. We thought it'd be a nice way for players to feel like they'd pulled one over on the Combine. Unfortunately, playtesters routinely thought that they had discovered a bug, or, at best, an exploit that had arisen from sloppy design. So in this case, a situation we deliberately created to make the players feel clever actually caused them to think we weren't doing our job very well. As a result of this feedback, we added a force field and additional grating to better protect the turrets.
This is art. You will hear a buzzer. When you hear the buzzer, stare at the art.